I was seated backstage thinking that growing a business is, or rather growing a successful enterprise, is really a tough call, right? For us women, it's almost like birthing a child. It requires a lot of perseverance, some serious leadership skills, and of course, on your feet critical thinking. Everyone wants to climb the top of a mountain. But the truth is that real happiness and real growth lies in the journey, in the climb. Ladies and gentlemen, our next woman of worth is here to talk about her climb of scaling up a small startup into a data powerhouse. The venture funds, private equity, and corporates today absolutely cannot do without. Please put your hands together as we welcome on stage Outlook Business Women of Worth superstar, co-founder Traction, Neha Singh. Okay, there she comes. Come on, let's welcome her with a warm round of applause.
Firstly, glad to see such a big audience of female entrepreneurs in Bangalore. This is probably the biggest, group that I would have seen in, across all the past years. And also this conference is unique in a sense that the female restroom has the largest line, which is very unlike most of the conferences where it's like nearly empty. So I don't know how many of you know Traction. We co-founded that about 5 years back. It's essentially an easy way to think about us is that just like Bloomberg is for public companies, we are building a platform for private companies, which investors and corporates use. I wanted to spend some time in highlighting some of the things that I have learned on the way and see if that is helpful for people over here. So I don't know if this works. Does this? Okay, cool. So how many of people here want to do a startup and are looking for an idea? Is there? Okay. Or people who are already doing a startup? Most of them? Okay, cool. So the first thing is about, a lot of people that I meet is they want to do a startup and are looking for the idea. And the first thing is about which idea to choose. So my learning has been that you should pick an idea that you really want to solve. You can be opportunistic about it, that that's a big market in US or in big market in China, and you want to build a large domestic market over here. But I think the key thing that I have learned is that it should be a problem that you want to solve for, say, the next 10 years. Because good chances is that in a startup there are a lot of highs, but there are also a lot of lows. So there are a lot of times wherein your conviction is tested, and at that time you have to really love and stay excited about doing that. So that's probably the first thing. And even if your startup is like really successful, which I wish for a lot of you, become, your journey for doing that is going to be long. So for instance, if you look at the average time to IPO of a company is about 10 years. Right? So you'll be probably doing that for a good time of your professional career. So it better be a problem that you like to do. Okay. The next thing after you've chosen your idea and have decided to take the plunge, the thing is about hiring. The first challenge that a lot of us face is about hiring your initial team. So someone actually gave me a very interesting tip, which I incorporated while hiring our initial team, which worked very brilliantly, and I'd love to share. So what I did was that I made a list of 15 to 20 people that I really respected, and I called them up and asked them that, in all their professional life, say they would have worked for, say, 5-6 years, who are the top 3 people that they would really recommend, right? And you'd be surprised that really interesting names come up when you ask this question to people. And what I did was that I made a long list when people gave their top 3 recommendations. Sometimes they did not remember at the top of their head, so I'll call them after a couple of days, give them time to think, and then ask them this question again. In about a few days, my list of candidates, so I had people who had been recommended by like 3 or 4 people. Which means that these are like really nice people, and when I'm meeting them, I'm actually not judging them for their functional abilities, which is anyways very difficult to do in the first meeting. What I'm looking at is more the fit. Are they looking to join at that position or at that stage of the company? So that makes your mistakes in hiring the initial team much lesser. Yeah, the next thing which we have debated a lot about, within hiring also, within the company, we are now 800 people strong, is what is the quality that you look for, especially in your leadership team, right? So the first which comes to your mind is obviously fit, that the person has to be willing to come to a startup of that stage, because most likely you're going to ask them to take a pay cut. So firstly, they have to be ready to come to startup of that stage for the role, etc. So that's probably the first thing. But the one thing which I found to be most interesting is asking the simple question is, can you trust the decision that this person takes, right? So when you're working in a team, you can have a logical debate if you don't agree with the person's point of view, but it's very important that you are ultimately able to trust their decisions. If you don't end up doing that, then what happens is that you're typically taking decisions for all the departments. You're picking up the top projects for marketing, top projects for ops, etc., which you can do probably initially, but as the company scales, it's very difficult to do that. And then you ultimately become the bottleneck for a lot of decisions. So this is another interesting thing that I have learned. Yeah. The next is getting the product market fit. So most of the startups in the early stage fail because of not getting the product market fit rather than because of lack of funding. For that, it's very important that that I have also learned firsthand is doing the initial sales yourself. In our case, our customers were venture capital investors. I spent the initial 1 or 2 years so I was in Stanford earlier, and we also started traction there. If for people who know, around Stanford, Sand Hill Road is like the biggest concentration of VC funds, like globally. And so I would have met like, nearly dozens of people in that area, to a point that I would, remember or know each of the streets and each of the parking lots. And I've visited them like multiple times. So it's very important to actually do the initial sales, because only then you understand, how the customer is, what do they think, what is their workflow. And that comes in very handy when you are taking the product decisions later on. Because as your company scales, you get lesser and lesser time to do that, because you have many other things to also worry about. Yeah. The next thing is competition. So a lot of founders actually, like young founders, I've seen them, they worry about competition a lot. They are fretting about it. They are tracking, what is the new thing that they have launched very, very closely. My learning has been that, worry about competition less. So to give you a simple example, like, one competition has lost a service for 100 rupees, and you think, oh, you should also be competitive, and you're trying to match the same price point of 100 rupees. After a year, everyone realizes that, it was never affordable in the first place to be selling at that price point. And like both of the companies had like a tough time. So typically, most likely, you only see the highs of your competition. And while as for your company, you see the day-to-day struggle. So what I've realized is that more often than not, your competition scenario is not as rosy as you imagine it to be, and it's not as bad for you as you imagine it to be. If your competition is someone like an Amazon or a Google or a Gorilla like that enters your space, then probably it's another thing. Then my sympathies are with you. But apart from that, for most other people, you can do away with worrying less about what the competition is doing. The last thing is pitching to investors. This is something that a lot of founders also go through. So I've also been like a VC earlier, and I've seen this in both the avatars. Typically, what I've seen is that people give a lot of importance to pitching how well they have executed, right? How well they have executed, how well the team is. But if you look at how a VC looks at their world, For them, typically, for most early stage, growth stage venture capital funds, first is market, second is team, and third is execution, right? So you have to give a lot of importance of selling the market to the investors as well, or selling, what your perception is of how the market is going to unfold. Once they are sold on the market opportunity that this is a large space, then it's much easier to convince them about that you have a great execution or that you have a great team. So yeah, this is some of the things that I have learned on the way. In case anyone has any questions, would be happy to take. But yeah, this kind of summarizes most of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, a louder round of applause. Thank you for candidly sharing what we can do better. Thank you so much.